Yeah. I
Just
mean,
depends.
there are
Yeah.
there are so much worse hobbies. There are so much worse habits. Like
Right. I could be doing
that's
heroin, but
right.
instead I'm
Right.
drinking caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah. Like definitely better than heroin. I think that's a good
Right.
slogan for coffee. Better
Yeah.
than heroin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MLS Now podcast preseason party. The extravaganza continues, the deluge of content, the onslaught of information, the avalanche of insight. It all is coming to you still hot and fresh off the press. Today, we have St. Louis that we're covering, but as always, before we dive into that, some quick housekeeping. Remember, you can find the podcast on social media at MLS Now Podcast. But most importantly, you can find me, your host, Russell, on social media at Mr. Danger Russ. But look, those first two, you always hear it. It doesn't hit home nearly as hard as our wonderful guest today, Tyler. Tyler, where can people find you on social media if they wish to engage with you?
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Russell. Friends can find me on Twitter or X, Blue Sky, and Threads, all at the same handle, STL Footy, all lowercase, all one word. Super easy. That's Footy with a Y, Footy. Yeah, I'm not great at posting regularly, but I'm getting back on that wagon this season. And if I don't, I'll just claim you put this in, as AI, and I never actually said that. So yeah, STL Footy on just about everywhere.
Yeah, well, luckily, the good news is that Riverside does have an AI voice function if we needed to do that. So, I'm glad that you said it in person so that I didn't have to dub this in later. So, thank you for your cooperation on that.
Hey, I'm here to cooperate.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here to cooperate because I know much less about St. Louis than you. So, if you were here being like, no, I'm not going to cooperate, I'd be like, oh, we got an awkward episode coming up. So,
Well,
hey,
I'll do my
let's.
best. I'll do my best. It's going to be a long conversation, so who knows? Things might go south quick, but we'll
Right.
find out.
Well, I did block off 7.5 hours for this recording, so we do need to fill all of that, and I
Okay.
appreciate your cooperation in advance.
You got it. You got it.
I know I told you we were going to try and keep this at like 45 minutes. That was a lie.
Yeah,
So,
fair enough. Fair enough.
you
I'm
know,
prepared. I'm prepared.
awesome. Well, let's begin our 7.5 hour conversation with just the very light reading, if you will, like light speaking, perhaps, since this is a podcast and people are listening. Let's just talk like high level major moves for the offseason, whether that be coach, big players coming in, players coming out. I, on a previous recording, had a statistic that at the time, St. Louis had the fewest total moves in the offseason, though that was probably 3 weeks ago. So, hey, maybe something has changed. Maybe you've got some good news for us. But yeah, just walk us through it, right? What's new? What's different?
Yeah. So working, I'd say back to front here a little bit. Definitely the fewest acquisitions in the offseason. I don't expect that to change. And it was anticipated coming in. Just as a reminder, last summer, the front office got ahead of things a little bit. They were explicit in saying, we have some targets that we want. They're available this summer. We're going to get them this summer. So there were 6 new acquisitions last summer, all very quickly slotted in, became key players, down the stretch once Leagues Cup got going. A couple of them were eligible for Leagues Cup, a couple weren't, but especially once MLS play picked back up, really saw all 6 get involved pretty quickly. So yeah, definitely during the winter, 2 acquisitions, definitely quieter on paper, but wanted to call out that yeah, a lot of the groundwork is done in the summer. So no surprises there. The big 2, I'm only going to dive into one of the super draft picks. So I guess 3 if we count it that way. But the big 2 are Timo Baumgartel. He's a 28-year-old center back. Definitely the flashiest acquisition on paper. Not the one I'm personally most excited about, but definitely, again, the biggest on paper. He's had prior stops at Eindhoven, Union Berlin, and Stuttgart. He came from Schalke, where things were a little dicey. They terminated his contract by mutual consent over the fall. Haven't gotten the full story there. So it makes me a little nervous just with some of the conduct issues we had last season. I'm always worried about that locker room presence, right? But so far preseason, he's been as billed, as advertised. And I think as we shift to a back three, he'll be a good fit. The other big one that I'm most excited about is Conrad Wallum, the 24-year-old Norwegian left back. It's no secret that since City joined the league in 2023, left back has been our glaring weakness. 2023, we just kind of threw whoever was available. 2024, we tried to shore it up with Nicholas Dorr. He did not work out. We ended up transferring him out. So he was only around for 6 months. Just was not a good fit. So I'm excited to see Conrad Wallum come in. He's been impactful, right off the bat during the Coachella Valley Invitational, really seeing him get involved. He had at least one goal and has just been a really creative spark there. Really nice balance to Thomas Daltland on the right. So I'm really hoping that's going to translate in the 2025 season. Moving on from players, manager turnover was very real for us. Carnell was let go just before Leagues Cup over the summer. John Hackworth stepped in. He's been a part of the organization since day one. Been a critical bridge between the academy and the senior squad. He stepped into that interim role. He was, by all reports, considered for the permanent job. I'm personally glad he wasn't given that role, but he went back into that technical director role that he was in prior. So glad he's staying with the organization, just because he's been critical, especially for our North American players, as someone that they've all been familiar with as we've recruited different players to the team. But the man who got the job, Olaf Melberg, comes. He joins from, I'm going to say this name once, and then I'm going to call them by their nickname because it's long and Swedish and confusing. Bromma Poikerna, also known as the Bromma Boys. So if I have to use the name again, I'm going to say Bromma or Bromma Boys. You got the one, and I just did my best there. So apologies if I butchered it. But those who were Premier League fans in the 2000s, the aughts, ears may have perked up a little bit. He was at Aston Villa for 8 years, captained them for a brief amount of time. Big Swedish center back. He captained Sweden during the 2006 World Cup. Had over 100 caps for the Swedish national team. At one point in time, he was being considered for the Swedish national team job in late 2024. So he's had some big success. Earned double promotion, back-to-back promotions with Bromma in his first stint from 2016 to 2017, and then he's been able to hold them in the top tier in the prior 2 years that he spent at Bromma. He's also had some other stints as well, but I'm really excited to see him come in. A little bit about Bromma that I think is really important for City's culture. They have what they tout as the largest academy in the world. So as City tries to establish an identity as a really academy-driven, MLS program, having a philosophical fit like that, I think is really critical. So, I'm sure we can get into tactics if we want to. I'm a little more skeptical on that front, but no question that he's a great philosophical fit for the club.
I appreciate the immediate optimism, and then I also appreciate that you're just like, great philosophical fit. I'm skeptical about the tactics, like the candidness on that, and it's just like, how can you just like say that and then try and like redirect us? Like, I need more, Tyler. Explain this position to me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, let's dive in. I think, I'm going to take things back to Hackworth's tenure, during the back half of 2024. We saw him mix things up a lot, right? Typically, under Bradley Carnell, we were running a 4-2-3-1, occasionally morph into a 4-3-3. But it was really, putting a lot of pressure on those back two center backs because it would allow the wings to push up. And we had some very eager wings who would leave their center backs exposed. What we saw Hackworth do, and I think what we really saw the organization change when they moved on from Bradley Carnell, was say, all right, we're getting exposed consistently. MLS teams have this back four figured out. And if we want to have these modern wing backs who are pushing up and consistently being part of the attack, we need to, cover ourselves a little bit better. So I think what we're going to see, all indications are that City's going to switch to a 3-5-2 or, a 3-1-4-2, however you want to split it, a back three. We've seen it in Coachella Valley. Hackworth tested that out a few times last season. And that seems to be the way that Melberg wants to play. I think especially when you look at the depth that we've put together, some of the players we've kept rotated around, academy products that we've promoted, a back three seems to be the way we're going to go. Hopefully Joachim Nilsson can stay healthy this season. He'll be a surefire starter, bringing in Henry Kessler last. summer. He's been a critical piece. And then Baumgartel, of course, I think is going to be that center pillar moving in. So my skepticism, comes from, comes from how the team had been constructed prior. Now, again, bringing in a total of 8 new players across the last 2 windows, all of them pretty much for the most part starters. Jake Erdwich-Wright won't be, but one day he will be. Very young player. He's only 19 or 20 years old. So still plenty of time to develop for him. He's part of the U22 initiative, so plenty of time for him. There are a lot of players who were well established in that 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, 4-4-2 system. So I'm hoping that the chemistry is there. I'm hoping that the tactical acumen is there. But where I get nervous are players like Celio Pompeu and Indy Vassilev, who really thrived in that back four system or systems that were built on a back four. I don't want them to be odd men out because they've been really impactful so far. Celio, I think until he got hurt in like May or June, horrific leg injury that put him out for the season. I'm honestly surprised he's going to be available on Saturday. He was, I think he's going to find himself odd man out in a back three, just because he's such an attacker that playing that as a wing back position, I think he'll struggle. So definitely skeptical. We're going to see systems merge. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's the modern game, right? Like players have to be able to adjust for multiple systems. Clubs all around the world have to change their systems all the time. So maybe I'm just being a little too sheepish so I don't sound arrogant, but we'll just have to see how it shakes out at the end of the day.
Very fair. I've noticed there's actually been quite a number of MLS teams that have switched to back threes, which it always takes me back. One of the podcasts that I listen to pretty regularly that covers Arsenal, one of the hosts on that, his name's Clive, and he would always talk about a back three and mention that when you run a back three, you're actually adding an attacker into your team, which we think about it, right? And it's like we talk back four, and you're like, well, you've got these 2 guys, fullbacks, and they'll go up and down the field. And it's like, how is it by adding a third center back, you're actually adding an attacker? But it kind of does make sense because you do free up both those players on the wings. You're not forcing one person to kind of half-heartedly commit. And let's be candid, right? MLS is not the Premier League. You don't have the world-class top-level fullbacks that can cover the entirety of the field and have the, tactical acumen and the awareness and everything to be able to say, oh yeah, like, that's fine. I'll go all the way up and join the attack, and we can have 2 center backs back there and it's fine. And then I'll just deal with it if I need to. Like that doesn't exist in MLS. So
yeah. Absolutely. And I think, where I am optimistic to that point is like you do get that additional attacker, and it does help, that both wingbacks will be allowed to attack, right? Like you said, it's not going to be the halfway. Do I stand at, midfield? Do I push up a little further? Hopefully players will get less caught, to that point. And at the end of the day, like it's crazy that even in a back four, Thomas Totland was as big of an attacking threat as he was last season. So hopefully he will thrive, being able to explicitly be part of the attack no matter what this season. So yeah, that's where, again, I'm saying I'm hoping that Conrad Wallin can finally bring some of that strength to the left side that City just has never had. Shout out to Anthony Marcandish. He did a decent job. He had a decent stretch, in late 2023. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, the league's always evolving, right? I mean, it's crazy. We've been in it for 2 years, and we've already seen the league go through a couple different iterations in terms of strategy, how teams treat one another, stardom, right, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's going to be a fun season, I think. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, other shout out to Johnny Nelson, who left you guys, went to the Galaxy, and now, MLS Cup winner there.
Yeah.
We miss him in Cincinnati too. I don't think anyone expected you guys to take him from us, and that's why we didn't end up, protecting him. And I'm glad that he won MLS Cup though.
Yeah, you and me both. He was never a great fit in St. Louis. I was definitely a little surprised too. He definitely found his legs at LA. I didn't mourn his departure at all last season, but glad to see he's found his spot. And if it makes you feel any better, we got bit by the expansion draft this season, losing Jose Kojima. I don't think anyone really saw that coming. So, what goes around comes around for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember seeing Kojima on his debut goal with you guys, and I was like, dang, that's a fun player. Like,
Oh,
nice.
man.
I hope we see more of him.
I'll
And
tell you
then
what.
we just didn't.
Yeah. He would pop in a few moments. I think he was a good rotational piece. And the team's approach with him was like, this guy's going to be around for forever because no one knows about him. He's a soccer genius. Like, his social media, seek out his social media because the guy is a huge soccer nerd. Like, there was one point last season where like I saw on his, Twitter or X or whatever we're supposed to call it, that he was breaking down tactics of like second tier Brazilian futsal and was writing papers on it just to put out there. If that isn't like the textbook definition student of a game, I don't know what is. And, one more anecdote in the Leagues Cup round of 32 match versus Portland, he never came on. It was a 3-1 win. He never came on, but I decided that night to go ahead, sit right pitch side in front of where the home players warmed up. I hadn't sat pitch side yet. So I was like, this is a good opportunity. Leagues Cup, let's be honest, the attendance not as high as MLS. So it was easier to get up front. And what struck me was on both wrists, he was completely taped up. And, a lot of players will write notes to themselves on their tape, right, on their wrists. He took it to a level I've never seen. It was like covered in X's and O's and numbers and strategies. It was like that kid when a teacher tells you can have the the crib sheet for a test in high school or college. The kid who comes in with like the barely legible text, that's what he had on both wrists. And it's like, man, this is a game where like strategically you're not going to come in, and yet that's still the level of detail you go to prepare. He was just a special player. I also know like he did so much in the community to support youth soccer. He's really going to be missed. I'm excited for DC that they have him because I can't ever cheer against the guy. He's a really special player, really special person.
This is all these anecdotes are giving me really big future head coach vibes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no question. He's definitely going to be a head coach one day, and whatever level he lands at, he is going to be the best. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he's the type of guy where like he settles in at like, I just love high school soccer, right? Or like, I love D3, or he could be coaching, a D1, churning out national championships year in and year out. Who knows? Whatever he is, he's not going to let ego define him based on everything I've seen and heard about him. So really just excited to see what he does with his soccer career, because it's not going to end when his playing career ends. That's for sure.
So we've talked a lot about what's happened, and we've talked about how, hey, summer window last summer was the very big intentional. This is where we're putting our efforts. We might not have a ton of movement in winter. Is that messaging being sent to like the casual fans, to the rest of the community as well? Like, are people concerned? Are they saying, if you look at just like the random like news articles, or if you hear like a water cooler, or like say on like a bus or at the mall or something, like, does the average fan see it that way, or are they kind of scratching their heads being like, well, everyone else is making these moves, why aren't we doing something?
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was prepping for this, because there are some rumbles, and I don't know if they're entirely justified. To the point that last summer there were a lot of moves, but I think in December when the league released GAM numbers, it definitely caused a stir, because St. Louis, I think, had the third most remaining. People definitely had some rumbles about investment. St. Louis has been in the bottom 5 in terms of player salaries, spend on transfers, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some concerns there. I definitely personally push back on that a little bit, because I think the team has been really thrifty in how it's acquired some really exciting players. I mean, just last summer, Marcel Hartel and Cedric Toiker combined for $0 spent on bringing them in, outside of their salaries, of course, and both are making pretty hefty salaries. So the club has identified the players that it wants to bring in. It's not going to overpay for them. Actually, specifically with Toiker, one year ago, last winter, City was in a showdown over a transfer fee because he had 6 months left on his contract, and they just didn't back down to Hanover. He ends up showing up 6 months later for free, in St. Louis, and now he's going to be a pivotal piece to the attack moving forward. Just an absolute baller. Now on the flip side, you can say, well, okay, Tyler, but last season St. Louis started off drawing 7 of its first 10, and missed the playoffs by about 10 points or so. So this high-scoring player who you can pretty much count on scoring every other game, if we could have turned 3 of those 7 into wins, maybe we would have been in playoff position. Okay, that's fair, but that's also a lot of hypotheticals. It's a lot of things that need to go right. Like, you can't just say he would have been the same player 6 months earlier. So, I don't know. I try not to get too much caught up in those hypotheticals. I want to look at the team we have now, and I think the team we have now can make some noise. I don't expect them to win it all by any means, but I think they're going to be a hard out. They're going to continue to be a hard out. So yeah, I'm optimistic, but I definitely do hear the general fan of saying, we've only brought in 2. Last season we missed the playoffs and we only brought in 2. Yeah, it's a valid question for sure, but I think there is some nuance to it, even beyond just that a lot of investment was made in the summer.
I think one thing that also stands out to me is you talked about like 7 out of your first 10, right, were draws. In your debut season, you guys went 5 straight wins and took this enormous lead going into the early season that just no one ever, like 15 points immediately off the bat makes it very hard to catch you. And no one caught you. I mean, you finished being Western Conference champions in your debut season. So I guess I'm looking at it, right? I'm clicking the link as we speak to look at the opening schedule. And you guys have an interesting, let's say, opening 5, right? Like you've got Colorado, San Diego, LA, Seattle, Philadelphia. And there's a mixture of like home in a way in that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question to you is, what's your expectations for these first 5, at least this year?
Yeah, this year, I'm going to take a little bit of a cop out because in my 2 years, in my 2 years covering City, I watched MLS before City got to the scene, but not to the degree I do now. And what I've learned is like, it probably takes 5 games to even figure out who's who. So there's my cop out excuse. That being said, I want to see, somewhere in the 7 to 9 point range. I think that's really reasonable. Obviously, LA is going to be a tough. They're going to, I think, start off super strong. At the end of the day, championship mentality is championship mentality. Colorado, we've struggled against. I think that's going to be a tougher home start than we anticipate. A team like that isn't going to be rattled by what is shaping up to be a really ugly, home opener in terms of weather. They're used to it. So it's not going to be the home field advantage conditions wise that we would hope it would be. San Diego, hey, I am not going to lay any expectations because who knows? We were projected to finish dead last our debut season. And then as we were just talking about, we ended up, winning the conference, at least in the regular season. So who knows what that's going to look like on March 1st. Seattle, I think that one's winnable. I think we can get 3 points there. I think we line up well against them. But again, as I've talked about the tactics, it just depends how it all meshes. And then Philadelphia, I'm going to chalk that one up as a win. I know it's on the road, but we know Bradley Carnell. I wish him the absolute best. I hope he's successful there, but we know those pieces. We know that team. They have their own drama that, is going on, not as much in the background as I'm sure they wish it is. So I think that should be a 3 point. So I think we're looking at 3 from Philadelphia. I'm going to be optimistic and say 3 against Seattle. And then we should be able to pick up realistically 2 or 3 points from San Diego and Colorado. LA, I'm going to chalk that one up to a loss just because I don't like playing champions early.
That's fair. It's interesting because I agree with you on almost all of those, except I've got LA and Seattle flipped.
Oh,
believe
okay.
it or not.
Okay.
And it mainly just comes down to the fact that like Galaxy seems to be picking up injuries like crazy right now. and it's not even like the season yet. Like they're already missing impact pieces. No Pooj as well. Like I have no idea
That is true.
what they're going to look like. No Pooj. They just sent Joveljic away to SKC. They picked up, I want to say, another injury as well in the midfield. So it's just like, I don't know. Like something's going to happen there, I feel like.
Yeah.
So whereas Seattle like got all these signings in the offseason, and I could just see them like riding a wave of vibes early on.
Yeah. That I think that's very fair. And I think you know, to credit the argument against me too. Seattle and St. Louis have played each other really tough. I think of our 6 matchups so far, we've drawn 3, and then split the others 2-1. So yeah, it probably will be more of a dogfight than I anticipate. Maybe I am being pessimistic. And yeah, to your point, Seattle has made a lot of moves. So yeah, maybe I should flip those. Maybe you're right.
Yes, peer pressure works. This is what the
Yeah,
listeners are hearing.
yeah. They want Russell to bully me into these predictions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, that's what I'm here for. It's actually on
Yeah.
my business card for the podcast. It's a podcast host and occasional online bully of predictions in MLS. And I actually have that spelled out exactly as you hear it.
Hey, it got me to sign on with MLS now. So keep doing what you're doing.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for your first 5 for the record. I think to your point, results going which way or the other. I think 7 to 8 points is a very reasonable and I think fair expectation early on. So, and I think that keeps you firmly in the conversation. You're not falling behind early. And I mean, if summer is going to be the big change for you guys, then, stay in the conversation until summer and then you can make anything happen from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the one thing I do want to call out too on last season is coming out of Leagues Cup, St. Louis averaged 1 2/3 points in its final 9 games. Putting on some rose-colored glasses for a second, or maybe some city red-colored glasses, you spread that across a 34-game campaign, that's 57 points. So once those pieces got in, right, they were all figuring each other out live in real time. And they were able to put together a pretty decent clip. Last season, 57, that was Seattle's mark, sitting right at 4th. So I think, obviously every season's brand new, especially in this league. But I think if you're looking at a team that's still playing pickup ball a little bit, so to speak, can average 1 2/3 across a quarter of the season, that has me feeling pretty decent. So yeah.
I dig it. I dig those city red colored glasses too, especially seeing the jersey reveals that have been come around they do with far too little notice for the season. It's like, hey, buy this jersey. It's like, could you give me like more than 10 days heads up to buy this? Come on.
You'd think they'd want a larger seller window. Hit the holidays, right? I would have loved to put one on my Christmas list, but
yeah, put it out there like 12/20 or something. You
right.
Let people like. You send out and be like, give the gift that they really want, to get them excited for the new year.
Exactly. I don't know.
But, oh well. Hey, look, they should put us in charge of marketing, and I'm going to pull this question forward right now. It's been my go-to closeout question. We're going to break up the episode by putting it in here. Let's say you suddenly become the head of marketing for MLS, and your task is a single action that is going to boost the prestige or the recognition or the engagement of the league, right? But this is your day one single action, not like a series of steps or plans, just one standalone action. What are you doing?
Oh man. Clearly I didn't listen to enough of these previews because I didn't make it to this question. And now I'm, caught with my pants down a little bit on this one. Worst part is I work in marketing too. So I should really have an answer.
I expect the absolute best answer of the entire series of preseason content then.
Yeah, I should really I should really have a knockout of the park queued up, and I'm clearly just stalling for time right now.
Okay. I can help you tread water if you need some ideas. I would say, Fortnite collaboration.
Okay. my one thought is, and I was going to bring this up in a slightly different framing, but I'll go ahead and put it out this way. I'm going to go on a little bit of an old man rant and just say, like, we got to start getting people out there who aren't messy. There are so many amazing players in this league, amazing stories, that I would just pick a random player, right? And just build this whole campaign around this one dude. I don't care who it is. I would pick Indiana Vassilev if I had to pick a St. Louis player, just like a random hard nose. Like, this is a bread and butter MLS player. Because at some point, the league is going to have to stop milking the goat. Shout out to my brother for coming up with that term. I can't take credit for that. And I told him I'd give him credit. So Evan, there you go. But yeah, you know what? Just go for the everyman. Like, that's what MLS is going to be at its best, is just like the everyman soccer league. At the end of the day, you just want the normal fan to sit down, have a beer, and watch some good hard-nosed soccer. So let's figure out who those players are, right? I mean, this weekend, right, we saw a NHL All-Star game, now the Four Nations, of just like, people are talking about hockey who've never talked about hockey. Now, I'm not saying we start having fights on the MLS pitch. Maybe that's my change as marketing, is using my leverage as head of marketing to say fights are now allowed. Because I think some teams would take full advantage of that. You know, City and KC would definitely enjoy that every once in a while. We definitely had a few scuffles with DC whenever we faced them. Minnesota, that's turning into a rivalry. So, you know what? Maybe that's my change. I'll use all the pull I have as marketing in terms of rules and say, this is the soccer league where fighting is now allowed. We'll have a penalty box only for fighting. Yeah, there's my change.
All right. And the winner of the fight gets to do like a 50-yard shootout, like against the goalkeeper, like take us back to like early MLS.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I dig it.
By the way, they should just institute that. They should bring that back in general. That is such a superior way to do penalty shots. So, yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that, I'm sure.
We could. And actually, we're doing that right now as, you know, part 2 of our 7.5-hour production here.
Let's go. Let's go.
Okay. So let's, I will bring us back on track though, right? So I have derailed us entirely. Let's talk instead about, you know, instead of early season, let's go all the way to the end of the season, right? And it's like, project yourself into the future, you know, manifest in your mind space that the date is now like October 17th or like October 30th or something, or, you know, November 2nd or 3rd, right? You're in the postseason, and if like St. Louis hits that 1.7 points per game threshold, they're sitting in like 4th place, they're hosting a home game. What would you attribute, you know, top 3 things that need to go right for City to get to that point?
Yeah. Number one is that 3-back system has to work defensively. By far, that was City's biggest weakness last season. People want to point toward low goal production, but really, that was not the crux of the issue. The crux was that defense was just plain leaky. So that back 3 has to work. The tactical shift has to work. Number 2, as I just alluded to, people point toward attacking and our forwards not having enough involvement in goal scoring. We had to rely on a lot of non-attackers to score our goals. Number 2, we need our attacking front to be the ones actually putting the ball in the back of the net. I think Joao Klaus got some stick last season for how he wasn't appearing on the stat sheet as much. Watching the games, he turned more into an orchestrator than an attacker. But when you're the point man, right? When you're the striker, you kind of got to strike. So we'll see if his role evolves this season. But at the end of the day, we need our attack to genuinely be the attack. And then number 3, get out of second gear. We cannot start off with 7 of 10 being draws again. Last season was just all of these small individual missed opportunity after missed opportunity. It never felt like City was out of a game. There were maybe 1 or 2 stinkers, but it never felt like City was really out of a game until the whistle was blown, and so many points were lost just on a team that maybe phoned it in for the last 10 minutes, or, phoned it in for the first 80 and then maybe pulled a point out. So you walk out feeling good, but the pack is still getting further and further away. It doesn't matter how you get there. 1 point is not the victory that it feels like sometimes. So those are my big ones. The back three has to work. The front, they got to reestablish themselves as, as a real attacking threat in this league. And then number three, get out of second gear. Find a way to be ruthless. Find a way to get full 3 points.
I feel like the Klaus shout ties into points 2 and 3.
Absolutely.
In that case. Which
absolutely.
Klaus was such an enigma for me last season, because you look at Klaus in season 1 and he's like pressing really hard and high and creating these turnovers and, scoring these goals. And people are like, oh my gosh, he's in conversation for the golden boot. And then, yeah, to your point, like he didn't show up on the stat sheet nearly as much last year. He felt like, I'm not going to say he was a non-factor, but he definitely felt like he was kind of regressing towards like average MLS striker last season, instead of being like high performing, tip of the spear attack that he was in season 1. And I think that's just, it's interesting to see that strong of a start, because normally it's the opposite in this league.
Right. I think you're hitting on something very real that was a big contributing factor to City's struggles last season, is that we had a lot of players who wanted to create the chance, but no one wanted to take it. And he was just as guilty of that as anybody else. Now, I think we did see a side of him to where, okay, he can be a chance creator. He doesn't necessarily have the defensive acumen to drop into that center attacking mid role, but maybe playing a little further back in more of like a center forward role fits his play. He struggled the most, though, by Nico Gioacchini's departure heading to Como, to where he just didn't have anyone to play off of for a long time. Now, when he and Simon Betcher, I don't expect them to pair a ton this season. I could be surprised. I don't expect them to pair a ton this season. Them two figured out how to play off each other a little bit, and you saw him resurge a little bit toward the end of last season, but you are spot on. Like, he definitely regressed. He definitely slipped more to average. I think he has more to offer. But at the end of the day, if you're coming here to play striker, you need to play striker. Like, I know, you've mentioned before, like, you're an Arsenal fan. I think especially fans of European soccer, the biggest learning curve for MLS is contracts are shorter. Like, your duration with it, you can have a massively successful MLS career and only be here for 2 or 3 years, right? So you got to make the most, more so. Like, you can't just have a season to get to know things or a season for your game to evolve. You got to make the most of it when you have the opportunity. So, need to see him get back to his scoring ways. At the very least, setting up more assists for Cedric Teuchert. Hopefully, he can continue to be, clinical. But yeah, we need to see more out of Klaus this season for sure.
I feel very targeted when you talk about Arsenal fans and strikers right now, considering where Arsenal are from a striker and attacking option injury crisis, and then not signing anyone as well in the winter window. So I'm gonna pretend that there are not parallels with what you're talking about, because I'm gonna convince myself that everything okay.
Well, hey, maybe part of our 7.5 hours can be each of us just, lamenting our Premier League team's various woes. I won't directly reveal who mine is, but we did just lose our winger to a freak ankle injury yesterday. We sold a promising winger who we didn't sell him, we loaned him. Who we spent $90 million for, and then all he did was run around in circles. So, my Premier League team is not doing any better than yours. So,
well, that's good, because I'm pretty sure mine's in fact doing better than yours, just based off what you've revealed.
Much better, much better.
Okay, so we're on the topic, right? Like, things have gone terribly wrong for both of our teams in the Premier League. What could go terribly wrong for St. Louis, though? Like, when you're sitting here, like, laying in bed at night, and you're just like, everything is going to be okay. We're going to be an amazing team. And then you wake up like cold sweat, middle of the night, being like, but what if this happened?
Yeah. My biggest fear, and every St. Louisan's biggest fear, is something happens to Roman Bürki. We actually got a little bit of a taste of that during this winter window. Allegedly, Copenhagen took a swing at him, tried to sign him, which we got this incredible quote from Lutz Pfannenstiel of, I don't care if the moon or Barcelona come calling, he is going to be here in 2025. So side note, keep your eyes on the moon. It's putting together one heck of a squad this season. But honestly, like, St. Louis has been bailed out right and left by our captain, by that Swiss beautiful monster in the back. It's no secret that this is the last year of his contract, hoping he at least extends for one more. I think he has the gas in the tank. But if something happens to him, the wheels are going to fall off very quickly. I'm not convinced that we have the leaders or the mentality yet to weather that storm. Now, shout out to Ben Lunt. To be fair, he's last season he had some opportunities. He played very well once he got settled in. He's looked decent in preseason. So I think, he's showing that he is definitely I'd say beyond serviceable in terms of a number 2. But you cannot over exaggerate the impact of number 1 back between the pipes.
Yeah, well, we're going to draw some more parallels to other teams here. I think of like Philadelphia when you talk about being bailed out, and you talk about as well leadership, right? Like Philadelphia fell off incredibly hard when Andre Blake was not on the field for them. And I could see the exact same thing happening to St. Louis. Now that you've kind of revealed that to my eyes, it's like, yeah, it does kind of like, Berkey does talk a lot. Like when the camera's on him, it looks like he's communicating a ton with the rest of the team.
He is, and in the very few quiet moments in that stadium, you can hear him. Or if you're, sitting behind not the supporter section, the other goal, you can definitely hear him. He's in constant communication. There are some captains who are just a part of the team, happen to be the guy who talks to the ref. That's not him. Like, he is the field general, no question. So yeah, that is my biggest nightmare. That is every St. Louis City fan's biggest nightmare, is if something happens to that man.
Very fair. Who would be your next man up in that? Unenviable, in the scenario that you don't want to happen. Who would be your next guy up, being like, hey, you take over?
Yeah, that has to be Edouard Louven, and I think to the point. He is definitely the next man up in terms of leadership, especially once Tim Parker, departed last summer. And I think in both 2023 and 2024, when we had stretches where Louven was out with injury, it did significantly impact the team. So that is a nightmare scenario if he goes down as well. We've already lived through it. We already know, kind of what to expect. I think we're more equipped now to weather that storm if he's the one to go down. But yeah, he will have to be the guy to step up and lead. Now, I will throw one dark horse out there, though. My biggest surprise of last season personally was Chris Durkin. Still very young players, only 22, 23 years old. But he's been such a commanding force as that center defensive mid. I'm hoping he can come back healthy. He's been dealing with some stuff during the offseason. He should be back healthy. He's put together some minutes in preseason, so I think he'll be all right. But he's really very quickly become a strong leader on that field. You can just tell from a, call it a vibes perspective. I think he's probably that dark horse number 3.
I'm looking as well, just curious, right? It looks like you guys have just US Open Cup this year. It looks like the only other outside MLS competition going on. So just want to get your thoughts on that. With only the league and US Open Cup, are you guys swinging for both? Or are you going, maybe saying, hey, US Open Cup, we'll run out like some guys from the 2 team for the first couple matches, and if we make it, then we'll put in the starters? Like, what would you expect there?
Yeah, I think the expectation needs to be to make the quarterfinals. Like, I think that needs to be a flag plant, considering that, MLS teams are entering at the round of 32. I think it's totally reasonable to say, hey, win two matches. But I never want to be the team that gets upset, right, by a non-MLS team. Not knocking USL. There are some phenomenal USL sides out there, and we always have some great stories coming through every year. But as an MLS team, there's no, shucks, we'll get them next time when you get bounced by a non-MLS side. So that should just be get to the round of 16, because you're going to be playing one of those teams in the round of 32. And then in the round of 16, odds are then you'll be playing an MLS squad. We have to prove that we can beat an MLS squad in a tournament competition. Yes, we beat Portland in the round of 32 of Leagues Cup last season. US Open Cup means more to the city of St. Louis. It just does. I think US Open Cup means more to just about every city than Leagues Cup does. So I think saying that we can win one, we can win the one that we should, and then we can win one against an MLS opponent, get into the quarterfinals. From there, I will be happy. How does that translate to say, okay, do we go for MLS and should we go for US Open Cup? You know what? Yeah. Honestly, I think we should. I don't expect St. Louis to win it all this season in terms of MLS. I think right in that, third to sixth range is probably best case scenario heading into the playoffs. And then from there, hopefully, get one of those home field advantage positions and move on to the next round. But I think US Open Cup, get to the quarterfinals, see where you're at, see how the bracket's shaking out, see who's still involved. And at that point, it's win 3 more, you have silverware. Go for it. There's no reason why they shouldn't win that if they can get to the quarterfinals. But I will say quarterfinals should be the objective this season.
Very fair. Very fair. I'm loving the extremely conservative takes here because like you're going to look like an absolute genius if, St. Louis make it exactly that far and people are going to be like, "Man, Tyler really knew what he was talking about." And then if they make it further, then people are going to be like, he was just being a negative, Nelly." But that no one holds it against you if you're being a negative Nelly and then you overperform. It's only when you're like, "Oh, we're winning it all." And then they're like, "You said we were going to win it all. We didn't."
Russell, I wouldn't put it as negative. I would put it as exceptionally humble. Yeah, exceptionally humble. That's how I describe myself. So you can print that or not. It's up to you.
Okay. It sounds like you're humble bragging now, though, which
that's your interpretation.
Can you still be humble and bragging?
That's not for me to decide. All I know is I'm humble.
Okay. Well, luckily, look, as the podcast host, I'm allowed to decide it. So I'm officially deciding it. You can't be humble and brag. So
all right, fair enough.
Awesome. Well, hey, as we're getting to kind of the end of the main conversation points that I've got, anything else on your mind before we wrap up here?
For St. Louis fans who are listening, I just want to raise the point that I think St. Louis sports are in a very weird position right now. I don't think if you could tell someone 10 years ago that the 2 most exciting teams in the city would be non-NFL forms of football, they would be confused, but they would laugh in your face. I think there's a lot of concern around the Cardinals and the Blues. A lot of people are down. I'm definitely down about the Cardinals. I'm not a Blues fan, but we don't need to get into that. But I understand the plight of Blues fans right now. But I think some of the concern, negativity, leave it at the door. When you walk into City Park, or now it's called Energizer Park, when you walk in the door, it's going to be fun. The players feed off of the energy. Show up, be loud.
Energy.
Hey, there we go. I'm already shilling. They need to pay me. But no, in all seriousness, like, show up, make noise, keep the supporter craziness coming. It's really awesome that, it's every fan's dream when a new side comes up that, hey, we're gonna be the loudest, proudest fans. I think St. Louis has established itself as a really energetic place. There I go again. Really energetic place. I'm gonna lean into it. Really energetic place to play. So I hope we can keep that up because it's a lot of fun. It's very quickly becoming part of the fabric of the city, and so let's just keep it going.
There you go. You're gonna have an electric atmosphere.
Hey, yeah.
Would you say you're gonna play some high voltage soccer?
Oh man, are you the City fan on this podcast?
I don't think so.
Man, I'm feeling inadequate now. This is.
I'll tell you right now. Resistance is futile.
Oh my goodness, that was good. I don't know. I should just hang up after that one. Just call it. That was terrible. That was terrible.
Well, you know what? Let's just ride the current all the way out through the rest of this episode then. So just a reminder for everyone listening, if you want to find Tyler on social media, I'm going to remember it. It's STL Footy, all one word, lowercase.
All one
Did I
word,
get that?
lowercase with a Y. You got it.
Nailed it. And then, as always, you can find the podcast on social media at MLS Now Podcast, or myself on social media at Mr. Danger Russ. But in the meantime, Tyler, thank you very much for hopping onto a call, talking St. Louis with us. Best of luck in the upcoming season. You're not in the East, so I feel great to tell you best of luck. I will have absolutely no regrets, regardless of whether or not you guys do great, or if you come in, with your very exceptionally humble predictions.
Well, thank you, Russell. Absolute pleasure to hop on and chat soccer with you today. Best of luck to you as well. Again, on the other side, it's easy to root for you. Hopefully, come November, we'll be doing a very different type of preview.
Right. I would love that. But look, we both need it.
We do. We really do.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you again, Tyler. Thank you to the listeners. And as always, folks, see y'all next time.